At this point, it is, I think about it in terms as the activity and effort based on the quality of the inputs for a person to begin to build the skills, the knowledge, the wherewithal to incrementally increase their impact on others. So ultimately, enhancing their efficacy as a leader with respect to the people they're working with.
Hey, look, it's Relationships at Work, a leadership podcast helping you build workplace connection, improve culture, and avoid blind spots. I am ever your host, Russel Lolacher, a communications and leadership expert with a couple of successful decades, yeah, that's the measurement of time, of experience in both those areas, and a whole heap of curiosity, just like you, on how we can make the workplace a better place. Something that comes up a lot on the show is training, leadership development, especially the lack of it when it comes to leaders. We're put in positions that we don't get support for. There is no infrastructure when it comes to leadership development. A lot of the time, I'm not saying every time, but a lot of the time. Sometimes it's pushed upon the leaders to find their own way, to find their own leadership. Sometimes organizations figure it out and they have a path, not always the way. So maybe we need a bit of context, and that's what we're going to talk about this week with Dr. Rob Leon. This is what he does as part of his coaching practice and his consultancy. Really interesting this week. He really steered through the conversation on what leadership development isn't, where we should be paying attention to. And as usual, we split it into the 4 parts of the conversation. Today, of course, clarity, definitions. What are we even talking about when we talk about leadership development? It's a good question, and that's why I try to ask it in every episode, because clarity is so important. Because I know so many organizations that define leadership differently, or they don't define things at all, as well as diversity, as well as so many other words we just throw out in the workplace culture sphere. And leadership development, it could be another one, because what does development mean to you versus what does it mean to your executive? It's a good question that I think we might need to ask a little bit more often. We got into it a bit with Dr. Rob Leon, and I look forward to you hearing more about him. All right, hold on. And on the show today, we have Dr. Rob Leon, and here is why he is awesome. He's a professor of human resource development at Idaho State University. He's a principal at Black River Performance Management, which specializes in leadership and organizational development. He's a volunteer at the Academy of Human Resource Development and contributing editor at Performance Improvement Quarterly, an academic research publication. Busy boy. And he's also here to talk to us about professional development. Hello, Rob.
Hello, how are you this morning?
I'm delightful. I'm not caffeinated enough, but I am excited enough about the topic, so that sort of fuels.
Awesome, let's do it.
So today we're getting into leadership development, the context of it, digging into what it really means. But first, I have to ask you the question I ask all of my guests, Rob, which is, sir, what is your best or worst employee experience?
So my best and worst are the same, actually.
Perfect. Okay.
And it was at the expense of someone else. So unfortunately, it was at the expense of someone else. I was raised in a family that didn't do confrontation and didn't have difficult conversations. And I brought that to college. I brought that into my marriage. I brought that all over my life, as you can imagine. As a young manager, as a first-time leader, this is the best and worst experience. It's the best in the sense of it's been the most influential experience probably of my career to change the trajectory of my behavior. It's the worst because I did something it wasn't horrible, but it wasn't great for the other person. So let me set it up. I was managing a team of 10. We were approaching end of the year evaluations, actually end of the business cycle evaluation. So we were actually doing evaluations in May. And so you just think about it, how a person enters an evaluation. Maybe they got their evaluation in advance so they could look at it and prepare some responses, or maybe you're handing them the evaluation. So first off, new leader, no framework, no help, no structure in terms of how do I do this successfully, right? So there's a learning lesson right there. So this woman comes in, and this is Meg. Let's keep it this way. She comes in and she's expecting a satisfactory, if not outstanding evaluation. I slide it over to her and it was like, excels, does not meet expectation, excels. And she said, Rob, what's this all about? This is May. I said, well, you remember back in October, you didn't do this one thing correct back then, and you haven't done it correctly since. And to her defense, she said, Rob, you never told me I didn't do it wrong. You didn't address this with me. So anyways, it was the best and worst experience because I felt so bad for her as a person that I treated her this way. And it's one of those things that I would never have changed for myself because it just changed the trajectory of my development and my career, that I needed to experience that to make the headway, to be able to do some of the things I'm doing today. So best and worst all at the same time.
Way to hold a grudge too. I mean, like, obviously you remember this bothered you and then it just needled you every single time since then.
Yeah, no, I love it. And full disclosure, with students, with clients, I'm always willing to be vulnerable, always willing to share, to help build that bridge. And I share this with every group I work with because we're not good at confrontation and accountability and feedback. And so I want to normalize the fact that I started at the bottom and I've grown the skills to be where I am today.
Fair. But you're not uncommon, Rob. I mean, how many people are in leadership positions that have no leadership training and shouldn't be in that position to begin with because they were a bum in a seat or they wanted to get paid a little bit more. So now they're in this role where they could do a lot of damage if they don't get the support, which leads us perfectly into our topic today, which is leadership development.
Yes.
It may be obvious to some to define what leadership development is, but I still find it really interesting to make sure we set the table with my guest and understanding how you would define leadership development.
Wow, I'm sure that definition will have changed over the course of my career. At this point, I think about it in terms as the activity and effort based on the quality of the inputs for a person to begin to build the skills, the knowledge, the wherewithal to incrementally increase their impact on others. So ultimately, enhancing their efficacy as a leader with respect to the people they're working with.
Okay. How do you define that, separating the word leadership with development? And the reason I bring this up is because we had some previous conversations and I've read a bit of your work. You talk about leadership not being simplistic. And yet we don't even define leadership, never mind simplicity about it. So what are we talking about when we really talk about leadership then to get to understanding development?
Sure. We're talking about a range of, it sounds very spooky, competencies, perspectives, practices, skills that relate to outward of us, as well as skills internally as it relates to what that leader is and the responsibility of that leader to accomplish certain tasks. So really, as you mentioned or alluded to there's an element of agility and being nimble, which is one of the first lessons that we encounter when we talk about leadership and leadership development, because you talk about it as in people don't have the prep. Very true. So where are they heading with trying to figure that out? Well, we know in most situations, the leaders above them aren't all that helpful in terms of onboarding and integrating, not to mention if they're an internal lateral position or like a promotion, giving them some cover to be successful in that position. So what do we do as humans in terms of whether it's leadership or anything else? We look to emulate. We look to base our direction based off of our positive and negative experiences of the past. But often when we do that, we're looking at things as very black and white and very similar to how people present things in, say, books, right? Mainstream books, they present just do this and that will work. And the reality is, no, it's not. It's super nuanced. It's context specific, shifts by the day. And that's one of the things that a leader has to fundamentally appreciate, is how this one size fits all approach is not going to serve anyone well.
Love that you said that. I have had some frustrations with a reoccurring question I see online, which is, what's your leadership style? And I'm like, if you have one style, you're a horrible leader. Like, it is a Swiss Army knife. It is adjusting, adapting to your point about the scenario or the area, the situation that you might be in, the situational awareness, self-awareness. We'll get into all that in a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's this confusion piece.
Yeah.
It's this confusion piece where we don't seem to know what leadership actually is. And I'm curious about your thoughts on this, because to your point, leaders are looking for model behavior, but leaders need leaders. And
Absolutely.
they're kind of being not helped a lot, because at the top, we are calling productivity leadership. And they're completely confused. Just because somebody delivers a thing does not make them a leader. And yet we will call them leaders, which allows them not to have to fix those human centricity focuses, that adaptability focuses, unless it's about delivering a thing. So how do we work with an environment where we're focusing so much on leadership development, and yet executive is defining it completely different than how we're supposed to be defining it?
Well, let's start with that question in and of itself, right? That just demonstrates to us, like, we still see this conversation about what's leadership versus management. How do you define your leadership style? This is where we are as a greater populace with respect to being prepared and capable to lead, right? We're at a very elementary level. We value people going to school, trade school, college, what have you, to get their engineering degree, to get their welding certificate, all these things, but we still haven't integrated this and prioritized this as a true factor to help enhance leadership. And because of that, it's to each to determine what that means. And if they're not very reflective, I think they get hung up in what I was mentioning earlier, that retrospect of, this is what a good leader has done in my life, and this is what a poor leader has done in my life. And without any, say, 360-degree feedback or anything like that, they might think they're going down the good leader model path, but they might actually be exhibiting the behaviors of the poor leader model path. So it's a very complex thing that what I think about, and I'm thinking about this a lot right now, is what is the person's leadership identity mindset? And how does that relate to how they actually practice leadership? And I would propose that if my identity is not high enough, we don't know what this number is yet, as a leader, I'm not going to live it and coach it to my people at the level I need to have as a target to break the cycle of, you got it, I believe in, here's your keys, here's your name tag, and go for it. That's where we're still at.
I don't mean to attack you because you're a professor, but do you think some of the bigger problems happen to be in post-secondary? Because, I mean, to be honest, we've got business schools that barely think leadership is a course you should take. Meanwhile, you have to take a completely different leadership program. And I can't tell you the reoccurring jokes that are, hey, you want to see a horrible leader? Get somebody that got a degree or master's in it. Like, I've heard that joke more than a few times.
Yeah. Those that can't play coach, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
The same thing. Yeah, and we'll never get away from that. Look, I think we're doing a good job in some spaces, but not all spaces. And I think, to your point, there are business schools that the amount of development that comes into the curriculum, we're not even talking about leadership. We're talking about, this is what I refer to, a capital T training, lowercase d development in one of their HR classes. And that might be even a class or a section, and that's it. And then you'll think about this in terms of the continuum. Then you find some people that will teach a leadership class, but they've never, same thing as business and entrepreneurship. They'll teach these classes, but they've never owned a business. They've never started a business. They've never led an organization. And so this is the best they're doing. They're trying their best, and I respect that. But to your point, there's a lot of truth in this, that if we're teaching from frameworks, very strict, empirically based, theoretical frameworks, and saying this is how it's going to be, our students quickly figure this out, that this guy really hasn't, or this woman hasn't been in the trenches, hasn't experienced this stuff. So they take it with a grain of salt to some extent. And that's actually why we've had a lot of gravity in our program, is that we try to spend a lot of time in the gray. And because we're both practitioners and scholars, and more so practitioners, like, that's what's at our heart, we try to clarify that there's a lot of ambiguity here. But, just the other side of it, this is true too. We've had people that don't have the advanced credentials that come in, and they just talk war stories based on their own personal experiences. And that doesn't help people either. And we get feedback from students that say, hey, look, this guy's just complaining about his old bosses and how to do this. So it's a complicated question to answer. But to your point, there's a lot of validity for us to unpack this because students are spending a lot of money to get this specialization when they do come into my program, because we do offer suites of leadership classes. And we do need to prepare them to leave here to be at some range of level of competence to go out there and be ready to tackle those things it's like I'm buying a car because I want to get to work. Well, if the car doesn't have tires on it, it's not that beneficial to me. It's the same type of concept people pursuing education.
Fair. To your definition of leadership development, I hear you and I completely understand what you're saying. But the more I hear about and understand leadership, this show's certainly helped over the last 3 years, is that I feel like there's less and less boundaries between leadership development, professional development, and personal development. It all feels like the same damn thing. Because to be a great leader, you have to have some pretty strong foundational human skills that doesn't seem to be understood when it comes to job descriptions. And yet, to be a great leader, you need that. Do you find that it's becoming more and more that way?
It's a reflection of our handle of our language. So one of the things we often talk about right on day one as we start working with groups is that we have to acknowledge something, that we do not hold, even though we speak English, we do not hold a common language among us as members of this organization. So if I even take something as simple as the concept of motivation, and I have 10 people on my team, I'll have 10 different definitions of that. So now blow that out against anything that wasn't taught in their craft. Engineers, they're prepared, they got their education. When they talk about these concepts that are central to their profession, they know what they mean, right? But it's when we come out of this stuff where we're not coming through a standardized, centralized concept that the language is all over the place. And to your point, some people are intermingling all of those things. And what really needs to happen to build high impact, highly effective leaders is a refinement of what are those 3 different concepts and how do they factor into a person's development so that they are becoming prepared to do the difficult things that they need to do. And some of it is professional development. Some of it is self-development. Some of it is leadership development, or even I'd change it to systems development. How are we leaders really at the helm of leading a group to navigate the waters ahead? But most of the problems in the organizations I work with are systems-based problems where humans are complicating it. And so the behavioral aspect comes in. So the more we could help people understand and slow down their pace of work to understand, look, you're hired in this role as a leader. That means you have to have some sort of understanding on how to steer this boat. And it's just not about the mission of the organization. Your leadership is a part of the mission of this job. And so it's really tough to do that when people have this mindset that, oh, I'm just way too busy to take time out to do anything.
Don't get me started on the blind spot of too busy, because I'm like, are you too busy? Then you're not a leader. You're time management. You're not, because you don't have the capacity. You're literally giving an excuse as to why you can't. And that comes to a close. Another episode of Relationships at Work, a leadership podcast helping you build workplace connection, improving culture, and avoiding blind spots. I'm your host, Russel Lolacher. Thank you once again for spending some time with us. Every Monday is about clarity when it comes to our topics. That means Tuesday is all about relationship with ourselves, how we can be better, how we could maybe focus on leadership development differently when it comes to our own mindset. Anyway, that's a tomorrow conversation. For now, I just want to see if you're good. You okay? Do you want maybe a little extra with your leadership learning? If you do, we have an amazing newsletter. It's an amazing companion piece to this. It provides some insights to some of the podcasts. It gives you a sneak peek of what's coming up. And also the meat of it is I dig into some insights that I share from my own experience, from what I'm seeing, from my conversations with other leaders, that maybe help you with your mindset for the week ahead. Anyway, if you're really curious about this newsletter, it's called Raw Notes, and you can subscribe by going to russellolacher.com or relationshipsatworkshow.com. Either or, you will find right there at the top free newsletter. I encourage you to sign up as a nice little extra, a little bit of zhuzh to the regular show. Anyway, I will leave it there, and I look forward to talking to you again tomorrow. Take care.